Day two of Ashley Benefield's trial, and there were absolutely fireworks today, including the defense attorney getting reprimanded and screamed at by the judge. And we're going to get to that because that happened at the end of the trial today. So first, we got to make our way to the end of the trial, but certainly some fireworks that happened before as well. So let's jump into the witnesses. And of course, as everything played out, I'm going to let you know and explain, because there's one thing today that happened that probably went over a lot of people's heads. But don't worry, I am going to cue you in onto everything that was really going on behind the scenes, and the things that you don't actually hear the attorneys talking about. I'm going to fill you in on everything that was not said. So let's begin with the witnesses. We had Alicia Byers, the mother of Ashley Benefield, take the stand, and she testified that Ashley did own two different firearms, and occasionally she would go to the firing range with the neighbor, John Sants. And yes, she did inherit a house in Maryland, and they were going to move from Florida to Maryland. And that last week, they were packing up the U-Haul, and they had a pod. They were packing it all up. And that last week, Doug was over almost every single day helping them pack this U-Haul and the pod. Now, the day of the fateful shooting, Doug arrived at around 5 p.m., and Alicia took Emerson, who is Ashley's daughter, to the park. So she went to the park, and therefore the only people at the house were Ashley and Doug. And she is very close with Ashley. She's in contact with Ashley every single day. And one of the points the prosecutor keeps bringing out with the witnesses is that did Ashley ever tell you about what happened? You know, if you're the victim and you have to shoot someone in self-defense, you would think that that's something that you would share with your loved ones, and certainly your mother, who you're very close with. And Alicia said, no, Ashley never told her about what actually happened that day. And on cross-examination, all that was brought out was the fact that she went with Emerson to the park that day was nothing out of the ordinary. She would always go with Emerson to the park, always take her to the park. It wasn't like Ashley said, take Emerson out of the way, I got to go take care of some business here. That's not what happened. Emerson and Alicia would always go to the park together. Then we had Barbara Russell. Barbara Russell is a mental health professional, and she knew Ashley since April of 2020. And Ashley actually moved into her house after the shooting for about 8 months. And she never discussed with her either about what happened. That was, again, a theme that the prosecutor is going to keep coming back to on cross-examination. It was brought out, you're aware that Ashley lawyers told her not to discuss the details of the case with anybody, which is what any decent lawyer would do. Then brought out the fact that she met with Detective Warren Justin for about 90 minutes discussing this case. And also, since she did observe Ashley right after the shooting, the defense attorney asked Barbara Russell, when you saw Ashley, how did she look? Did she look like she was banged up at all? And she said, yes, she did certainly have swelling above her left eye, which would, again, suggest that she was hit by Doug. And if she was hit by Doug, then there's more of a reason to argue that this is actually a self-defense case. And Ashley also did communicate to her that she was in pain by her head. Then we had Lieutenant Dan Dickerman. Lieutenant Dan Dickerman is a senior homicide investigator. And one of the things that they wanted to bring out, the prosecutor wanted to bring out, is the fact that Ashley was not arrested right away, meaning they did not right away label this a murder as opposed to self-defense. They definitely investigated the case, and only after some investigation on the case where they started to think that this was actually a murder and not a self-defense case, only then did they arrest Ashley. So Ashley was not arrested until November of that year that Doug was shot. Doug was shot in September. Remember, September 27th, and she was not arrested till November. Then he also testified that CPS was on scene, and CPS spoke to Alicia Byers, who's Ashley's mother. And here was a little bit interesting because the prosecutor definitely wanted to bring out that Alicia was not being cooperative. And he said, yeah, she was not really being cooperative, but she did answer a lot of their questions. So exactly how she was not being cooperative is not so clear if she's answering all the questions that they need answered. He did eventually execute a search warrant. He got some video from around the park where it did show Alicia Byers with the Ashley's daughter, Emerson, that they were at the park during that time. He also got some ring camera footage from around the neighborhood, around the area of where the shooting happened, but nothing, the shooting itself was not caught on any sort of ring camera. Now, in cross-examination, the defense attorney wanted to bring out the following fact, and it seems that this is coming out. It seems like at some point there is something that's going to come out, maybe by the lead detective. There's going to be some sort of mention somewhere, somehow, that's what it seems like, that one of the detectives who was investigating this case decided that, or made some sort of comment that all homicides are murder. And obviously that's incorrect. If that's how you approach all homicides, there are a number of homicides that are not murder, it's self-defense. So it seems that the defense attorney is going to make a point about this. So when he had this lieutenant on the stand, he wanted to ask him a hypothetical question. He was saying, well, if I would apply for a job and thought that all homicides are murder, and he was going to try to ask him if he would get the job or whatever, and there was an objection, and therefore he stopped the question and he moved on. Now, I think that what he could have done is he could have said, okay, let me not ask an hypothetical. Let me ask you, are all homicides murders? And then get an answer, obviously not. And he said, right, obviously not all homicides are murder, because there's a number of murders that are justified, like self-defense. So you wouldn't classify that as a murder, right? And obviously anybody that would is a little ridiculous. Shouldn't be investigating crime scenes, right? So he could have still, I think, gotten the point out without asking the specific type of hypothetical question that he was setting up to ask, which is why he got objected to. Now, if he gets an objection after that, okay, you have to deal with it. But there was no further pushing on this issue. I think it could have been done. Anyway, so moving on, he also brought out in cross-examination that Alicia Byers was visibly shaken at the time. So we're hearing these reports that she wasn't being cooperative. Yeah, well, she's going out of her mind, right? Her daughter was just involved in some sort of serious altercation. She doesn't really know the extent of her daughter's injuries or anything like that. And she's shocked also. So it's not the type where a person's just going to sit down and just be able to answer any questions and help you in any sort of way when they're in shock. So that's a point that he was bringing out. Okay. Then we had a very interesting witness, Stephanie Murphy. Stephanie Murphy was the attorney, the family law attorney for Doug Benefield. And she is very clearly on the side of the prosecution, on the side of the state. She absolutely 100% believes that Ashley murdered Doug, and it was not in self-defense. And she goes through the story of how she was retained. So she was retained March 2018 by Doug Benefield. And initially, the scope of her representation was just to send a letter to Ashley Benefield asking that he knows that Ashley is going to be due soon. This is in March. And he wants to be part of the birth of his daughter. So he asked an attorney, can you do whatever you need to do, send a letter, file something in the court. I want to be part of this, my child's life. I want to be at the birth. And it seems that the first draft, this first letter, was just asking that Doug can be at the birth of this child. And she even said that in the letter, it said that, if you feel like you don't want him there, that's completely fine also. But he just wants to be part of it. So will you just allow him to be part of it? Now, this was sent on March 15th, 2018 by email. She never received a response. And then the baby was born, even though she checked herself into the hospital the next day, Ashley, to get induced. But the baby was not born until March 19th. Now, the attorney also testified that nobody knew about that. Doug didn't know about that, and she herself didn't know about it. And the only reason that she found out about it is because she was monitoring the court system to see if any filings are happening in that case. And she noticed that that Ashley filed for a restraining order for domestic violence on April 23rd, which, again, she didn't see till May 6th, 2018. So this is about 6 weeks after. And that's when, in that document, which she filed for a restraining order, she puts in there, or her attorney puts in there, when the baby was born, when the child was born. So that was the first time that she found out, again, this Stephanie Murphy, the attorney for Doug Benefield, found out that Doug had a baby. Doug had a child, that Ashley had a child. So obviously she communicated that to Doug. Now, she did follow up on this petition, and she explained that there's a number of different things that the judge does with a petition for a restraining order. In this specific situation, the judge denied the petition flat out because there wasn't enough evidence to support a restraining order. So sometimes you get partial restraining orders, temporary restraining orders entered. Sometimes you get, we'll have a hearing. In this case, the judge didn't even do anything but deny the petition because there's such a lack of evidence to support the petition. But the judge did set a date to review it. So even though he's denying it flat out, they're still going to review it and maybe have a hearing or look at it again and see what there is to do about it. So then what Stephanie Murphy was hired to do by Doug Benefield was to file a petition for a joint parenting plan, unconnected with divorce, meaning they don't want a divorce yet. And there's obviously a parenting problem here. Ashley wants the child for herself. Doug wants some involvement in the child's life. So there is a way, there's a mechanism. You file a petition for a joint parenting plan not connected with divorce, meaning if a couple is still trying to reconcile. So she filed this petition. Now, in Ashley's petition for the restraining order, she alleged all of these allegations. One of the allegations was that Doug beat up a dog, punched the dog, which we heard about in the opening statements, that he shot a gun into the ceiling, that he was trying to poison her and her child with heavy metals. So that was in Ashley's petition. And then you have the Stephanie Murphy filing a petition on behalf of Doug Benefield for a joint parenting plan. Now, on September 17th, the judge denied Ashley's restraining order and granted Doug Benefield's petition for a time-sharing plan so that they'd be able to share time with the child. And what the order provided was that Doug actually would have the ultimate decision making about the child's medical needs. And otherwise, besides that, it would all be a shared decision-making process. And therefore, finally, Doug is now able to see and meet his child. So they talk about that meeting. And that was 6 months after. So 6 months after Emerson was born, now finally Doug's being able to meet his child for the first time. And his attorney, Stephanie Murphy, accompanied him to the meeting. And the meeting was going to be at the sheriff's office. Initially, sometimes you have to do it only at the sheriff's office so that everything is going to be controlled and everyone's supposed to be doing what they're going to be doing and nothing gets out of control. So that was initially what they were supposed to be doing. So they met at the sheriff's office and Stephanie Murphy is with Doug. And the first thing that Ashley says when she sees Stephanie Murphy with Doug Benefield is she says to Doug, "Are you dating her?" And obviously she said, "No, this is my attorney." She's just my attorney. And then she did let Doug take the child, take Emerson and hold her for the first time. And they were talking for a few minutes. And then Doug tells his attorney, Stephanie Murphy, that they're deciding that they're going to spend this time, even though it's completely Doug's time, he can completely have Emerson for himself. He says, "You know what? I'm going to spend the time with Ashley as well, so we can all be together as a family." Now, Stephanie Murphy tells Doug that she thinks that this is a terrible idea. As you can imagine, she just filed a petition for a restraining order against you, recently, and she alleged all these unfounded allegations against you. And now you're going to just go spend some time together with her. She's setting you up for something. And her advice, Stephanie Murphy's advice to Doug was, don't do it together with Ashley. It's not a good idea. But he didn't listen. After all an attorney can do is advise their client. The client has the ultimate decision-making ability, and that's what Doug did. He decided, no, we're going to do the timeshare together. So that is when really peace started. They had some peace. And for about the next 11 months after that first meeting, everything seemed peaceful between Doug and Ashley. Everything was great. Even they signed a stipulation which allowed Doug even more time with Emerson than he was allowed under the court order, which you're allowed to do. You're allowed to file a stipulation saying, we agree that, he should have more time. And then the judge will just sign off. So that's what happened. And they also agreed in that stipulation that they don't have to meet at the sheriff's office anymore. So things are actually looking pretty good for the Benefields. Doug and Ashley, it seems like they're coming together, reconciling in some way, and they're figuring out a way to raise this child. Well, it lasted for about 11 months, the piece. And the Stephanie Murphy, the attorney, says, I did see them in different forms of media, like they're on different maybe news stations or whatever. They were caught with media, and they were that type of couple. So that's how she saw them together over the course of that 11 months, but never really personally ever again during that 11-month span. And then August 16th, 2019, no, they're not talking to each other anymore. There's no more talking between Ashley and Doug. Something happened. They're done with the piece. And that's when she was retained, Stephanie Murphy, to file for divorce. And Doug files for divorce November 6th, 2019. Within a month of filing for divorce, Ashley files for, another protective order or restraining order. And then she testifies that at some point, Stephanie again testifies, Stephanie Murphy, at some point, they decide to see Dr. Broder. Dr. Broder is going to perform a psych evaluation. And this was not ordered by the judge. Sometimes a judge will order a psych evaluation. This was not ordered by the judge. We're going to hear more about that later. But they did both attend Dr. Broder's psych evaluation. And then they had this. Okay, so let's remember what happened. They filed for divorce November 2019. A month later, around sometime December 2019, Ashley files for a restraining order. But the hearing for that restraining order doesn't occur till September 30th. As we've heard this date before, a significant date, September 30th, was supposed to be the hearing on that restraining order. But first, they had mediation. So there was some mediation where you have a mediator who's kind of a go-between, who tries to help the parties figure out a way to settle the case or settle the divorce in this case. So there had some sort of mediation. And this is what Stephanie Murphy's testimony was, that although initially, September 30th was supposed to be the hearing for Ashley's petition for a protective order, for a restraining order, as a result of that mediation, the focus of the hearing changed. So although initially it was set for just the hearing on the protective order, now it's changed to just a joint motion to release the psych reports that were authored by Dr. Broder. So completely changed. If you have a hearing on the docket, you may as well continue with the hearing. And sometimes this happens. If you have a hearing set for one specific issue and you've resolved that issue, but you have some other issue that you want to discuss, then you can come to the hearing and say, Judge, we just like to discuss this other issue. Or you can file some more papers that have to do with this other issue or this other thing that you want to take up. So that's what happened here. That's what she's explaining, that really it was initially set for one thing, and then after the mediation, it changed, and they were just going to be September 30th was just the joint motion to release the psych report. And they decided, as a result of the mediation, also that they were going to try to reconcile, and they're going to move to Maryland together. And that was, I guess, a good result of the mediation. Well, the last thing that she testified was that Doug was always very mellow and he was calm. He never overly expressed anger. He wasn't that type of person. And this can kind of get into character evidence, character testimony, which is not really always so admissible, but that is how she ended the direct examination of Stephanie Murphy. And then we had cross-examination. But the cross-examination may have started already, but then there was some lunch break. And then after the lunch break, before the jury comes in, the judge tells the attorneys about what happened over the lunch break. So he says that he was actually in his office doing some research on some of the law that they're discussing in this case, which is common. And one of the deputies notified him that an unidentified female who said that she was a reporter had has some information about this case and contacted the judge's office and wanted to speak to the judge because she has information. She's a reporter. I guess she's watching the trial, and she has some information that she thinks is important for the judge to know. So this is going through the judge's staff. The judge obviously did not speak to this unidentified female directly. And the judge tells this unidentified woman through his intermediaries that he can't meet with her. That's not how this works. If she feels that she has some information on this case, then she can come to open court and let everybody here know. There's not going to be any ex parte meetings here. If you have some information, then everybody deserves to know. The prosecution deserves to know. The defense deserves to know. You can say to me, the judge, don't worry, the jury's not going to be here. And the cameras, I don't know, maybe could be here. Maybe we can work that out. But he invited her through his intermediaries to come to the court and in open court say what she knows about this information. Well, he just wanted to let everybody know that she actually, this unidentified female, called back, or they contacted her and explained to her what she has to do. And she says, you know what, in that case, no, thank you. I'm not going to be interested. And of course, the defense attorney says, well, I'd like to know what she knows. So we'll see what happens there. Now, what was very interesting is a certain line of cross-examination. And there's a line of cross-examination that the defense attorney was using on this family law attorney, Stephanie Murphy, who is Doug Benefield's family law attorney. Okay. And what he was trying to show was the following. He was trying to show that there is a certain rule of professional responsibility, which means, which is that you have to act with a certain candor to the judiciary. So the judiciary. So if, let's say, there's a judge and you are an attorney, you have to act with a certain candor to the tribunal. And that means that you're not allowed to knowingly make a false statement to the judge or in your papers, right? You're not allowed to do that. You can't lie. And you can't either put up testimony, which is a lie. Can't do that as a lawyer. If you know your client's going to take the stand and lie, you're not allowed to do that. All right. So what he was trying to cross-examine Stephanie Murphy about is the following. And I think a lot of this was missed, and that's why I'm here to fill in the blanks for a lot of you that are watching. When there was a complaint filed, when there's a complaint that's filed, what happens is that you list your complaint in paragraphs. Number one, number two, so number one will say plaintiff resides at whatever address. Number two, the defendant resides at a certain address. Number three, the amount in controversy is whatever it is. And four, and you list it on four, and then you begin. On May 30th, 2019, this couple engaged, they were married, and whatever. It goes through different paragraphs, right? It's numbered. You file the complaint as the plaintiff, and then you serve it on the defendant. The defendant then has a duty to answer the complaint. And in each of the allegations that the plaintiff lays out in his complaint, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it is, however many they want to list, the defendant has to answer each allegation. Number one, number two. So his answer is also going to be the same exact numbers as the plaintiff's complaint. And then there'll be also additional filings that the defendant will file. Whatever. We don't have to get into that. But on each of the allegations that the plaintiff complains, the defendant needs to file an answer. And they have to either admit, they have to deny, or they can say that we don't have enough information to admit or deny. So, but they have to let the plaintiff know where they stand on a specific allegation. And here, what happened here is that Stephanie Murphy, as the attorney for Doug Benefield, answered, seems to be a complaint. Again, I don't know exactly which filing that they're talking about because there's a number of filings here. Answered some sort of complaint that Ashley Benefield filed, or her attorney filed, and she denied something, which is, by the way, very extremely common. Even when you don't know 100%, a lot of times the defense will just deny the allegations. And if something comes out in discovery that they can take back that denial, they potentially, technically should file an amended answer to your complaint where paragraph 17, we're now admitting, or, we have more information. How often does that happen? Not that often. What the defense attorney wanted to do here is to show that there's a certain allegation in the complaint which you denied as an attorney. And therefore, you have to act with a certain candor, which means that if at any point you know that your filing is now false, that you have to go correct that filing. Okay. Now, in every case, does this happen? No. Most of the time, it doesn't happen. But here he's trying to use it to show or try to argue to take away from the credibility of this attorney, Stephanie Murphy. And what he was trying to show is the fact that you denied a certain allegation. That allegation seemed to have to do with the fact that Doug Benefield acted in a certain way. He shot a gun into the ceiling, or he punched out a dog, whatever it was. But if Doug Benefield later in that same proceeding admits to certain conduct that he did that, for example, then really technically, as the defense attorney, what you should do there, if let's say the allegation was that he shot a hole in the ceiling when he was mad, or he wanted Ashley to be quiet. If he then admits that in a deposition, so then technically you have a duty as a defense attorney to amend your answer to the complaint and say, now we can admit allegation number 8 that he shot a bullet into the ceiling. And she didn't do that because you never do that. So that's why she didn't do that. But technically, if you look at the rules and you can make this conclusion from the rules, so then you can say, well, don't you have a rule of professional responsibility and ethical responsibility to amend your complaint? You're not acting with candor to the court. And part of this, the reason why the defense attorney wants this, number one, obviously it attacks the credibility and of this attorney, and also shows that she's not ethical, which again, no attorney appreciates, but he's got a client to represent, and this is how he's deciding to do this, the defense attorney. But another reason why he wants this in is because he wants the fact that Doug admitted to some of these allegations, because we're just going to be hearing about allegations that he did this. But when are you ever going to have the fact that he admitted to doing these things, that he admitted to shooting a gun in the kitchen, which shows him to be a crazy person? And this is what the defense attorney wants in as badly as he can. So what he wanted to get in through Stephanie Murphy was the fact that she answered this. Again, this is what he's arguing this should come in because it's impeachment. It's impeachment to her because she's saying certain allegations, and she denied those allegations in a different filing. And later in a deposition in the civil case, in a different case, not the criminal case, Doug admitted to doing that. And now you should have taken back your answer. Now, what the jury hears, of course, is that Doug admitted in a deposition that he shot the ceiling. So that's very much what the defense wanted in. Okay, so now you are filled in. If you were watching, you weren't 100% sure. Now you're filled in on exactly what was going on, what the strategy was. And the judge did not allow this in. Judge just didn't allow this in. Said, this is just crazy. This is how you're trying to impeach the witness. It's just too broad. There's no case law behind it. I'm not letting you do it. And then, continue the fireworks, the defense attorney moved for a mistrial. And he moved for a mistrial, and he didn't just argue the fact that you're not allowing me to effectively cross-examine the witness. And by the way, motions for mistrials happen all the time in a trial. And sometimes it's uncomfortable because you're telling the judge that you made certain rulings that are error, and therefore it's causing your client not to have a fair trial. And of course, it's difficult to do, but you got to do it. And aside from this specific area of cross-examination, which he's claiming is the basis for this mistrial, it's also the fact that he mentioned that in some sort of order of the court, the judge, this is what he said to the judge, and the judge didn't really explain much or said anything about it, but he said that the judge himself gave an opinion about how he feels that Ashley Benefield is guilty. Now, can I imagine that the judge would do that? No, I can never imagine that the judge ever did that. Again, this is the argument that the defense attorney is making. And therefore, he's saying, the judge, you already made up your mind, and I can tell that this trial is not being run fair, and from all your rulings, and therefore we're moving for a mistrial. And of course, the judge denied it without any further explanation. All right, so now we can actually move on to the actual cross-examination of what happened with Stephanie Murphy, the attorney for Doug Benefield. So he brings out the fact that she has no doubt, again, this is the theory here, that she has no doubt that the reason that Ashley Benefield murdered, this is the state's theory, that Ashley Benefield murdered Doug Benefield, was for the fact that she did not want that report, that psych report, coming out in the September 30th hearing. And therefore, she murdered him 3 days before that. Now, there are seem to have been some emails which show that the hearing was actually supposed to happen September 23rd. And Therefore, if the hearing was supposed to happen September 23rd, then obviously that's September 27th is after that. But, and then when they said, and then there's some sort of emails also talking about that the September 30th date, 3 days after the murder, was actually only supposed to be with the hearing on Ashley Benefield's petition for a protective order, for a restraining order. And there's some emails saying that that's the only thing that we're going to be arguing about or talking about on September 30th. So you've got some emails like that. So the attorney tried to explain, that Stephanie Murphy, she tried to explain that, no, that was only before. But after the mediation occurred, then because of the mediation, everything changed from the mediation. So then he said, do you have any sort of document, any sort of email, any sort of document that shows, that says what you're saying happened? And we don't just have to take your word for it. And as at this point, there was no document that was showing that. Now, also, a point that he brought out was the fact that in March 15th, 2018, when she sent this letter, when Stephanie Murphy sent this letter, there was in place a already prior restraining order that was from South Carolina. When they lived in South Carolina, Ashley did get a restraining order on Doug, and it was during this time period when the restraining order was in effect. So he was saying, why are you even suggesting that he can come to the birth of his daughter when there's a restraining order not allowing him to have any contact with her? And her answer to that was, well, if she would agree, then we can just amend or dismiss the restraining order. It's not like you're stuck with the restraining order. If you filed for a restraining order and you want to get rid of the restraining order, you'll just do whatever you need to do to get rid of the restraining order. Contact the court, file some papers, and dismiss the restraining order. So she said, yeah, I mean, we'd have to take care of that, but that's not something that's impossible to do. All right. Then we had Chris Gillum. Chris Gillum is a domestic violence investigator. And he also talked about the report. So there was these reports that Ashley filed. So there's reports of Doug violating his injunction. So there was a restraining order, as we remember, from South Carolina. Then she moved down to Florida. And December 17th, she reports that Doug violated the injunction, the restraining order. How did Doug violate the restraining order if he's in South Carolina still? And even if he moved down to Florida, how did he do it? Well, he actually sent her a gift. This is what came out. He sent her what the attorney called a birthday present, which was a tea set. Came out later, was a tea set. And therefore, Ashley says, well, you're not supposed to have any contact, which includes sending me something in the mail. So therefore, she reported him to this Chris Gillum as Doug violating the restraining order. And he testifies that he spoke to Ashley like between 30 and 40 times. They were always on the phone together. She was always calling him, asking him to investigate, asking him to take measures to arrest Doug for violating his restraining order. She kept calling him, and he decided that no, there's nothing here really to arrest him for, and therefore he forwarded the charges to the state attorney's office. She was very upset about it. This was his testimony. She was very upset about this. And she called him in May of 2018. And again, what she asked him was to arrest Doug at a court hearing. So a different court hearing, some sort of court hearing that's going on. She tells this guy, Chris Gillum, that he should come and make sure that Doug is arrested at the hearing in front of the judge. That's what she wants. And he told her, quite simply, that's not happening. I'm not going to go into a different court hearing and just arrest somebody in the middle of court. That's not how this works. And I'm not going to do that. But she was hysterical. This is what his testimony was. She was hysterical on the phone. And she said that if the judge sees you, arrest him, then this will help me keep my baby. So again, we're seeing how she's hysterical and she's wild about keeping this Emerson, the baby, for herself. And again, he's telling her this is not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And then she said, you will effing arrest him in front of the judge, and I will make sure that you do it. Now, how is she supposed to make sure that he doesn't Nothing. But this is just an hysterical woman talking on the phone. And again, he said this is not happening. And then she says to him, I can't believe you're allowing Doug to kill me and the baby. And then at some point she screeched, and he was actually asked to recreate what she did. Try to sound like you're screeching. And he's like, I can't screech that loud. And she says she's screeching, I will do whatever I have to do to keep my baby, you a-hole. And that's what she screeched. And then she accused him of conspiring with Doug to take her baby away. So it sounds like a crazy woman. It absolutely sounds like a woman who's nuts and unhinged. And he said that in 12 years, no one has ever spoken to him like that. Now, in cross-examination, the defense attorney brought out the fact that she was complaining about receiving this package from South Carolina, even though there was an injunction in place. And also interesting is that actually when she first complained about this, there was a deputy, Wesley Weber, who actually requested an arrest warrant for Doug. I guess he just took her word for it, or she showed him some of the documents, the restraining order, and then she received something in the mail, and this deputy actually issued an arrest warrant, or requested an arrest warrant. But when this guy, Chris Gillum, took over the case, and he looked into this, so in May 31st, 2018, he overrode the arrest warrant and he placed it into inactive status. So now you can understand why Ashley's really upset about this, because initially she was getting her way. She was actually going to get Doug arrested. She got Deputy Wesley Weber to fall for that. And now this other guy, Chris Gillum, comes in and overrides this other deputy. Now, obviously, if everything that she's saying is true, then you can understand why she's completely hysterical about it, because she really feels that she's in fear of her life, or her baby's life. Now, in June 5th, 2018, Chris Gillum interviews Doug. And part of his investigation was to confirm that this tea set that Doug sent as what we know now as a birthday present, seems, that when was it sent to Ashley? Well, it turns out that it was sent to Ashley on the same day that the restraining order was signed by the judge. So the defense attorney's response to this, and what he keeps going with his questioning with cross-examination, is the fact that, well, that's when the order was signed by the judge, but when they had the hearing in court and the judge told him, we are going to grant the restraining order and therefore you are not to have any contact with Ashley, well, that happened before. So even if the order was signed on the same day that Doug sent this birthday present to Ashley, still, Doug was told a few days before that by the judge that he is not to have any contact with him. But according to Chris Gillum, it doesn't matter what the judge said. Nothing is really final until there's an order that's entered. And since the same day that the order was entered is when he sent the tea cups to the tea set to Ashley, so it's not going to really affect anything. And I can't say that he's in violation of this restraining order, and I'm not going to arrest him for that. He also brought out a very good point, the defense attorney. This was actually a very good point that he brought out. And that is that the fact that Chris Gillum authored a number of different reports about this. And when this craziness on the phone, that was in 2018. Well, he didn't put the fact of everything that she said in that phone call and everything that she screeched in that phone call to him, he didn't put it in any report. And he authored a number of different reports, 3-4 supplemental reports about this. And the only time that he put this in the report was after the murder. And he spoke to the leading investigator in this case, the leading detective, and that's when he decided to author a new report which details this conversation and this screeching. So that is definitely a good point that the defense attorney brought out, cross-examination, that, hey, if this actually really happened, why don't you put in a report right away in 2018, or even the next report, or the next report? But you have to wait till after this murder to say, oh yeah, this is worthwhile reporting. So on redirect, he said, well, I didn't think it was really important for my specific case, but after I heard about the murder, so then obviously it would be important for that case. So that's why I decided to add that into the report. Again, not the greatest answer. So definitely a point that was scored by the defense attorney. All right. Then we had Brian Moreland. Brian Moreland is the Detective Crimes Against Children unit. And he detailed the different allegations that were made against Doug Benefield. So December 10th, 2019, there was allegations of sexual abuse on Emerson. And then March 21st, 2020, there's an allegations of physical abuse on Emerson. March 23rd, 2020, again, allegations of physical abuse. April 5th, 2020, April 27th, 2020, all allegations of physical abuse on Emerson. And the result of all of those allegations and all of their investigations separately into all these different allegations, all these accusations of physical abuse, no charges were filed. And at some point they had a meeting, they called the staffing, and they suggested that Ashley and Doug do a psych eval. So this is really suggested, it wasn't ordered by the court, it was suggested by the Detective Crimes Against Children unit. When they see all these complaints coming in and there's allegations of physical abuse, but every time they don't see anything that they can press charges with, well, maybe they should go get a psych eval. So they sent Doug and Ashley, they suggested that they do a psych eval, and that's what they did. Now, something that was brought out in cross-examination, which is a very important point, and is very significant, is the fact that these reports that were all made were actually not all from Ashley. They weren't all from Ashley. And we don't know who the other reporters were, although the defense attorney did try to bring that out, that they were reported by some other mental health professionals. And that could be just hearing from Ashley, because if Ashley tells a mental health professional some allegations of abuse, well, then maybe that mental health professional is going to go report that to the detectives for the crimes against children unit. So again, it's mostly all coming from Ashley, but it's just seems like it's being reported by Ashley to a bunch of different people, and their duty to report. That's why they're reporting these. All right. Then we had Brad Broder. Brad Broder is a clinical psychologist, and he was the one that conducted the psych evals on Doug and Ashley that we've been hearing so much about. So he conducted them, the evals, on June 1st, 2020. And this is where it came out, the fact that she was acting differently when she was with Doug as opposed to when she was by herself with Brad Broder herself. So she would just act differently. And she made it clear to him, Ashley made it clear to him privately, Brad Broder, Dr. Broder, that she was not really interested in reconciling with Doug. But when they were together, then she would pretend at least that she was interested in reconciling. And at some point she told him that my life is in shambles. But then she also said that she's willing to go to a second marriage counselor. So she is going to go to a marriage counselor. She's not interested in the relationship. It's a little confusing. Now, also interesting is the fact that Emerson's last name, her daughter that she had with Doug, her last name is not Benefield. Her last name is Caney. And also on the birth certificate, Doug is not listed as the father. And she also shared with Dr. Broder that she did not inform him of the birth. She informed Brad Broder that she was frustrated with the court system because the court system wasn't working out. And she really felt that Doug was unfit to be a father for Emerson. And she claimed that all these agencies are getting it wrong. The legal system is getting it wrong. Everyone's getting it wrong. And Emerson is really not safe if Doug is her father. Now, she showed up one day to Dr. Broder's office, and she wanted a copy of the report, which would seem natural. You want a copy of the report. But he said, look, I cannot give you a copy of the report. I have to give this report back to the agency that requested it. So it's not a regular patient to doctor relationship. Yes, I did meet with you and talk to you about this information, but I can't give you the report. You actually have to go petition the court to get this report. And she also told Dr. Broder something very interesting, that she believes from her own research that if she would move to Maryland, after she's living there for 6 months, then she could take measures to have sole custody of Emerson, of her daughter, which seems to be the big reason behind the murder here, that she really wants Emerson all to herself. And she thinks that in Maryland, she'll be able to accomplish this. So that can also suggest why she wants to move to Maryland. So that's essentially what happened there. On cross-examination, all that was brought out was the fact that it seemed from Dr. Broder that Ashley was the type of person who was a go along, get along person. And that's what her attitude was towards Doug, that she just wanted to appease him and to keep Emerson safe. That's what she felt that she had to do. All right. Then the day ended with Dr. Quintel, who is a mental health counselor. And he also was talking to Ashley Benefield, a lot of the very similar things, that she was discouraged by the legal system, and she really was questioning whether she really even ever wants to be with Doug, if she ever really wants to reconcile and be with Doug. So a lot of the same that we've heard already from Dr. Broder. Now, on cross-examination, this is where the judge got very upset with the defense attorney. On cross-examination, again, he tried to bring out the fact that Doug admitted to him that he did certain things, like shoot a gun in the kitchen and punch a hole in the wall and punch out a dog. So he's trying to get this in one way or the other. Now, it seems that the rulings in this case was very clear that that information is irrelevant, or that information cannot come in through these witnesses. And again, he tries to get this in, or seems like he's trying to get this in, through Dr. Quintel. And while they're kind of discussing this, when you have a witness stand and you have the defense attorney asking these questions, the defense attorney blurts out, because as soon as he starts mentioning something about Doug admitting or Doug saying about these episodes, there's an objection, and the objection is sustained. And Dr. Quintel kind of gives a chuckle. And the defense attorney says to him, "Oh, you have no idea." Okay, like, "Oh, you have no idea." And at that point, the judge had it. He sent the jury out. He sent the witness out. And he asked the defense attorney, "Do you want to say anything before I'm about to tell you what I think I need to tell you?" And the defense attorney says, "No, but I have a feeling I'm about to get a whooping. And I'm not exactly sure why." And the judge then reprimands him and says, "You've said that you've done over 400 jury trials before. And you should know at this point, you may not agree with all my rulings." And that always happens, right? There's no attorney in the world that's ever tried a case that has agreed with all the rulings that the judge has made. It just doesn't happen. And he says, "You are welcome. If this case comes down not in your favor, you are welcome to appeal all of my rulings in this case from the beginning to the end. But if I make a ruling on this case, then you should respect that as a officer of the court and as an attorney who's so used to trying cases in front of juries, jury trials, that you should know this. And you should not try to get an information that I've already excluded and try to get it in one way or the other." And on top of that, your side comments about, "Oh, you have no idea," like that, that's inappropriate and it's unprofessional. And you shouldn't be doing it in front of a jury either. So you're the one, again, and kind of like stuck it in him. You're the one a minute ago who had Stephanie Murphy, this other attorney, and you were saying how she should be familiar with the rules of professional responsibility or conduct, and so should you. And you should also act with that same candor to the tribunal. And he gave it to him, and he had a decent point. And that's essentially how that ended. Now, they did call the jury back in. They had some more questioning, and really the only thing next thing they brought out was the fact that he was a little bit confused. This Dr. Quintel was confused about why Doug wanted to stay in the relationship, because if Ashley just really has very scared of him and has nothing good to say about him and always disparages him and always makes these allegations, it was a little confusing to him why he actually wanted to stay in this relationship. So that's where the testimony ended today. A very interesting day from all these fireworks that occurred during the trial, and always makes watching this trial a little bit more interesting. So that will be it for today. Looking forward for the next day of trial. We're going to be right there, bringing you the analysis and the recap. That's it for now. Please, if you haven't yet, subscribe, like, and we will see you next time.